You're tuned into the Magnet Radio Hour here at 96.7 WNUC, low power radio FM for Detroit. You're listening to the radio hour at the Allied Media Conference here, annual event here in Detroit. And I'm joined now by Carlton Turner of Alternate Roots, a strong force out of the South. Carlton, can you just tell me, I noticed your shirt today, you got the Black Man Running shirt on, the 5K for social justice.
Yeah.
And I know you've been involved with Magnet for many years. Could you tell me about sort of how you got involved with Magnet?
Oh, man, Magnet, I think I've been knowing about Magnet probably since it started. Alternate Roots, as Magnet was kind of founded at the Highlander Center in Newmarket, Tennessee in 2003. Alternate Roots was founded at the Highlander Center in 1976. So it's a birthplace of a lot of strong cultural organizing units. And so understanding, what the purpose of Magnet is this kind of like very much similar to what Alternate Roots is in terms of a membership-based organization that builds a coalition of strong cultural workers in the South. Magnet is doing the same thing with media makers across the country. So there's some very clear connections and intersections in which we found ourselves actually acting in a lot of the same arenas. So there's a number of Magnet members who are also members of Alternate Roots, and we just work together on a lot of different levels.
Right, and I was at the Highlander Center last year, which is really a fabulous place, historic place for civil rights struggle throughout the South, and evidence that I saw there of a real movement throughout the South. Could you just talk briefly about the Southern movement?
Well, there's a saying that says, so goes the South, so goes the nation. We are and have been the economic powerhouse center of the country since its inception as the United States of America. The fields, the commodities, the cash crops of cotton and sugar cane and rice and all of those things that tobacco that powered the financial backbone of this country are all about the South, and the policies that were developed around that type of infrastructure of exploiting labor, of exploiting indigenous people and people of color, all was really brought to fruition in the South, and it continues to be a place of heavy exploitation, a place of really strong and shifting demographics, and a place where we're fighting and struggling for the same basic human dignity that we have always been, and so the movements in that part of the country have always been really rich and strong and connected to faith and connected to the ability of all people to have some level of access. Alternate Roots is a part of that legacy. Our organization was again founded at the Highlander Center, and we're 40 years into that legacy now. We're working with organizations at the founding of at the beginning of our organization's founding was organizations like Roadside Theater out of Appalshop, the Free Southern Theater out of New Orleans, which actually was out of Mississippi and became that theater arm of the SNCC movement. You have organizations like Project South for the elimination of poverty and genocide. You have Alice Lovelace, who was the first director of the U.S. Social Forum in Atlanta in 2007. Her job before that was, the executive director of Alternate Roots. So there's a lot of connection. Alternate Roots is very connected into the fabric of the movement. Martin Luther King Jr., the Free Southern Theater, the Freedom Summer, Freedom Riders, all of this stuff is very much Southern based.
Right, and that's what I like about Magnet. So often we conceive of what happens in this country as happening on the coast, in the Beltway. And what's unique about Magnet is it covers the various regional differences in the movement throughout the country, and places like the South, which oftentimes gets left out of the sort of national picture. And that's why I think it's important here that the AMC for the Midwest is a kind of pull for a lot of people regionally and people sort of off the map typically in a lot of conversations.
Yeah.
So, but at the same time, we're also affecting national debates and I wanted you to tell the story about a recent campaign at the level of the NEA, and as I understand, you helped get somebody fired at the NEA.
Well, I can't take any of the credit. That credit goes to Carol McCord, who's my operations director. But Carol was actually attending a conference at the National Endowment for the Arts on diversity, inclusion, and access, and equity. And as part of this conversation, they were dealing with equity in the arts, racial equity specifically. And at a small table where they were having story circles, a man who was the executive director or president of the National Association for Music Educators made the statement that his organization was not, that his board was as diverse as it was going to get. It was all white, and that his organization primarily worked with white instructors and teachers because blacks and Latinos lacked the keyboarding skills and the understanding, the educational, intellectual capacity to understand music theory to be able to excel in music education. And my Carol challenged that idea and that whole frame of thought. And when he was challenged by other people at the table, instead of standing there and having the conversation, understanding why that was problematic of a national leader, he stormed out of the room. And so because this was a public forum, Carol then wrote a public letter to the National Endowment for the Arts and to the public describing the event and saying why this is an issue. And that letter went viral, got more than 30,000 hits on our website, and subsequently, in less than 2 weeks, that person was fired from their job, which is a pretty high-profile position. So it was not a campaign that we went out to do or enact, but it's one in which we responded. And because we had the capacity and we were part of networks that could get the information out and we could share the information, that our voice was respected enough to where people actually took the time to recognize this moment and see what it really means in terms of our commitment as a field to equity and cultural equity, diversity.
Absolutely. It's hard to believe anybody at the head of the NEA would be just saying anything disparaging about the history of black music in this country, which has always been the center of American music.
You would think, right? You would think that statement, thinking about people like McCoy Tyner, Stevie Wonder, Herbie Hancock, that, to say that blacks lack the keyboarding skills to understand music theory is just, how can you, at any rate, profile that in your mind to be a statement that has any basis in reality? And so that's a really important moment for us to recognize. I think the level of voice that the organization has achieved through network and through affiliations and organizations like Magnet.
Yeah, and right now we see all over the country the movement building, so it's important that we're making these contacts across the country and building our network out. And so please, folks, you can look up Magnet online, the Media Action Grassroots Network, check out our website, get in touch with us, find out how you can become a member. We're always looking into signing up more folks and widening our network.
Yeah.
So we've got to transition and keep it moving today, but thank you, Carlton, for being out
Absolutely.
and showing up today.
Thank you, Brian.